Hey everybody, welcome to the IM Canada Connect presentation for today for the month of October. Happy to have all of you here. There was a lot of people, a lot of participants, certainly on the signed up list. And as always, we will record the presentation and have it available for people afterwards to be able to come in and see it at if they can't be on live today. Uh, Really happy to have Sean here today, and I'm not going to kind of read a whole script and introduce him and everything. I'm going to let him talk about himself a little bit. I just wanted to say though that I Am Canada Connect is really excited this year to be able to work with Donna Malloy as well as part of our team on the program side. Donna's been just wonderful to work with, and thank you, Donna, for all the time you spend with us to make sure the program is put together. But we did a presentation last month from the federal government of Canada on the data side of things, which is becoming more and more important all the time. And I thought this is really important to maybe get Sean and get him to talk a little bit about data and his information at the City of Edmonton. And again, thanks to Donna, we have Sean here today, and really excited to hear the presentation myself, Sean. So. I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce yourself to the crowd.
Perfect. Thank you, Rick. And thank you for having me as well as Donna. I think she was the one who first facilitated it. It is an honor to come here and speak. Hopefully, by the end of the presentation, you folks will understand how much I appreciate my information management counterparts. So I guess that segues into who am I? I've worked for the City of Edmonton for over 10 years, and my official title is a data strategist. So I love telling people that at parties because no one knows what that means. But essentially, I work in a branch called Service Innovation and Performance, which is essentially kind of like a centralized strategy branch. And within that branch, there's a section called Business Intelligence and Analytics. And within that section, there is a team called Data Governance and Data Management, and that is where I reside. So I'm pretty sure that made sense to most of the audience, unlike where I'm hanging out after work. Um, but yeah, I'm a data strategist. And a funny story is my boss, the other day I think we were talking with Gartner and he referred to me as a senior data strategist. So I asked him, is there a pay bump included with that longer title? But I haven't seen one yet. So that's a little bit about me and where I come from. And hopefully the presentation will tell the rest of the story. So I'll just jump into it. Also, I'm going to try not to rush. I'm kind of used to presenting to the C-suite, senior executives all the time. So usually my presentations are only 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes at the most. So I'll try and slow down. And as a consequence of that, I'm naturally a fast talker when I present, but I'll try and slow it down for you folks today because we have more time. So anyway, I'll jump into it. All right, let's just see here. Okay. To get to the thesis of this presentation, you must first understand the situation that led us needing to solve this problem in the first place. The text you see on the screen is actually from another presentation I gave called Lord of the Data, and kudos to you if you get the reference. But I feel that it really encapsulates the environment that the city of Edmonton found itself in. Maybe saying that there was no plan is a little harsh, as when the city was founded in 1904, data management wasn't a thing. But nevertheless, we ended up with this organizational structure. Specifically, note that information management and data management are in separate areas of the city. Their common link is literally only the city manager, whereas at least if we look down, IT and data management share the same deputy city manager. I have a feeling that this may be a similar situation for many of you in the audience. And I do want to also point out that our data governance and data management was originally in IT, but then it got moved to this new service and innovation performance branch when it was created in 2020. So, when my boss became the manager of data governance and management in 2018, which was founded in 2017, he asked me to research the relationship between data and information management. I found that there seems to be no defined industry standard when it comes to delineating between information management and data management, and the various definitions overlap, are nebulous, and quite frankly, are often convoluted. However, there did seem to be three general schools of thought. The first is that data management and information management are the same. And this is taken with the grain of salt that one believes that modern information management has evolved past traditional information management, which is the operational manner of information lifecycle management. There are even references to information data management. Second is that they both fall under the umbrella of records and information management. And third, that data management is a subset of information management. And I can tell you, my boss really didn't like hearing about this last one, despite the fact that it seemed to be the most prevalent school of thought. And it makes sense if you really think about it. Information management is, without a doubt, the longer established discipline. So it would make sense that data management kind of came out of it, out of natural evolution. Nevertheless, however you slice it, it is apparent that these two disciplines should be working together. So, in 2018, we established the Data Governance Working Committee to bring together all of the subject matter experts for data and information. The purpose of this body was to tackle any pain points that anyone in the city had regarding data or information. And we made the manager of the information management team the co-chair. The formation of this body was a good start and had some success improving several processes. But as a working committee comprising more technical staff than leadership, with the highest position being a manager, it really didn't have the weight to help us establish the high-level policies needed to implement proper data governance. My boss also did some research and found out that there had been 7 kicks at the old governance can, and all of them had failed. Of course, there are many contributing factors as to why these attempts failed, and to be honest, some of these attempts were decades ago, so we don't really know the full story. But I'm comfortable in stating that one of the main reasons was that the city was and is siloed. It's kind of a funny story because he came to me after 2 weeks on the job and doing this research, and he was really worried that he was going to fail. And at that time, our team is now 6 people, but at that time it was just me and him. And I think I was called a business solutions analyst at that time. And it was kind of funny because you looked at my background. I don't know if you guys read, but I was a teacher before for 10 years, and didn't really have a lot of experience. So he was like super stressed, and I was just like, "Don't worry, we'll sell it." And it ended up turning out. But it's always funny when I think back to those early days. So luckily for us, though, there was a major project called Enterprise Commons that was really starting to take off. EC, a project to upgrade the city's existing ERPs into one new ERP, SAP S/4HANA, involved a major data migration, and it was determined that more data and information governance was needed at the corporate level to help make decisions for the whole city. So we were able to convince the branch managers of SIP, OCC, and OCT to meet and make these important decisions for the Enterprise Commons project. However, once we had them in the room, we then pitched them to become the program sponsors of data governance and the Data Governance Steering Committee, which became the city's de facto Data Governance Council, to use the industry term. This was critical as they represent the 3 branches that have the delegated authority for anything to do with data and information. We also rounded out the committee by asking the branch managers of HR, numbers, and stuff to join us as well, as they are heavy users of data and were the 3 other streams in that Enterprise Commons project I talked about. It is important to note that we learned that the Data Governance Steering Committee itself cannot make any binding decisions. What it can do is get all of the people in the room who have a piece of the delegated authority pie, so to speak. So, while the committee itself is powerless, to be frank, and when I told my director that when we found out, she laughed pretty hard, it is still not useless as it functions to bring together all of the key players to ensure that all of the relevant perspectives are considered. Furthermore, all of the sponsors have repeatedly said how happy they are that this committee now exists. It truly has led to greater collaboration. And there have been a couple of times where the line of whose authority should be making the call hasn't been clear, but that has never really mattered as they always reach a consensus at this committee. So I can't stress how important this committee has been for us for data management, and I feel like for information management as well. At this point, things were running much better, but there was still a little friction as to which area is responsible for what and who should be doing them. So we took another dive into data and information, except this time we focused on the similarities. Much ink has been spilled over the relationship between data and information. Data has been called the raw material of information, and information has been called data in context. DAMA, the de facto leading resource for data management, states that the two concepts are intertwined and dependent on each other, which is why DAMA also states the need for data and information to be managed together. So I know DAMA, it's a very data-centric book. And as you saw from the quote, it uses the terms interchangeably, but it really stresses you need to be managing them together to get the best results. And we have found this to be true. Indeed, if we look at the high-level goals of both data and information management, they are virtually the same, with both wanting to strategically maximize their assets' values to enable their organizations to achieve its goals and objectives. This picture is what I got when I asked Gemini to draw a picture of data management and information management working together. I don't think we really need to worry about the Terminator 2 type situation just yet. So, how are they different? We came across a Lego metaphor to distinguish between the two disciplines, which I love. Data governance represents the individual Lego pieces, while information governance incorporates the sorting, arrangement, and creative structures that can be built using those pieces. Essentially, this means that data management and information management need each other to holistically manage data and information to their full potential. So we thought we should enshrine this ethos in policy, selecting the highest one possible to give us the Data and Information Management Administrative Policy. The primary authors of this document were myself, Data Management, and Gina Smith, the Manager of Corporate Records and Information Management. Of course, it was also useful to have the Data Governance Working Committee and the Data Governance Steering Committee established to both review and endorse before we took it on the corporate roadshow before finally taking it to the city manager. By the way, if you're curious and you want to see this policy, you can just go to edmonton.ca, type in, policy areas, and you'll find this there. This singular policy brought together all of the data and information functional domains, setting the stage for the city to ensure its data and information are managed to maximize value while minimizing risk. The pros of this approach are the existing governance structure missed how each area's work is integral to the success of others. It also dispelled the illusion of unequal importance, which is counterproductive when each functional domain relies on others to achieve its aims. Furthermore, the cohesive nature of this policy enables employees to easily understand and locate requirements through domain-specific coding. And through its rollout, city staff have been made more aware of their accountabilities and responsibilities they have for data and information. Ultimately, this policy is a step towards achieving the city's vision laid out in its data strategy, which is for the city to be a data-informed organization that manages its data and information assets as strategic resources in an integrated manner to maximize their value and use, both internally and externally. If that doesn't get you out of bed in the morning, I don't know what does. This policy will do all of this by offering these guiding principles for data and information management. In alignment with the Open City Council policy, this principle emphasizes the value of greater transparency, accountability, increase in community engagement, and innovation and economic opportunities driven by the release of data and information. The value of data and information is only as good as its quality, which starts before creation or collection at planning and ends at disposition. The city needs to collaborate to ensure full alignment with the needs of users, both internal and external. Taking an integrated approach allows business areas to add to and benefit from data and information. And stewardship ensures that the right people are making the right decisions with the right information and have a vested interest in its care. The city must also have the dexterity to maintain momentum in this rapidly changing environment, adopt best practices, and evolve with transforming system and stakeholder needs. The city must also practice responsible spending. However, these financial restraints need to be weighed against the payoffs of investing in the future. And finally, the city must consider all of the functional domains of data and information as equal and understand that each domain relies on each other to achieve its aims. On the last slide, we talked about aligning functional domains. So now let's take a look at the policy framework to show how they work. Starting at the top, we have the authoritative policies and legislation that the framework below is in alignment with, followed by that singular administrative policy, which has 7 domains. And below them are the policies, standards, guidelines, and other policy/non-policy tools. Starting with the ones we already have as policy tools in gold, the ones we have but aren't part of a formal policy tool in blue, and the gaps we've identified from requests from business areas and research in red. And to be honest, this slide should be updated as many of the red have been turned blue and blue gold, but I wanted to show you our starting point when we made this pitch to leadership. Regarding who will be implementing, the timelines, the budget, and the required resources, each area working with the corporate policy team will be leading the creation and implementation of the policy tools that fall under their particular domain. Specifically, the access and privacy domains will be led by the Corporate Access Privacy Office in OCC, architecture by the Technology Planning Group in OCT, and Business Intelligence and Analytics in SIP, business intelligence by surprise, surprise, business intelligence and analytics section again, governance by the business intelligence and analytics section and the information management section in OCC, lifecycle management by information management, and security by the Corporate Information Security Office in OCT. Again, we want to highlight that although these different areas will be leading each domain, all of the other areas will work with the leads to ensure alignment and that all perspectives of data and information management are addressed. For example, you can't really talk about security without also considering access, privacy, architecture, governance, and you get the idea. Moving on to timelines, we estimated that it'll take around 3 to 5 years to develop all the policy tools in blue and red. And finishing off with budgeting and resourcing, a lot of the work was already accounted for in terms of each area's existing budget and staffing level, as they were already responsible for their policy tools. So let's get into an example of this in action to demonstrate how smoothly the new integrated governance structure is working. You're probably familiar with these information security classification levels. There's the most open level, followed by a less open level, and you get the idea. The issue is that the Data Governance Working Committee, the group of data and information subject matter experts that slots in just below the Data Governance Steering Committee, came to be aware that at the city, there were 3 different sets of definitions for these 4 levels of security classifications. The glossary of terms, which was stewarded by OCC, had a set of definitions. So did the Corporate Information Security Office, and the data analytics team did as well. These security classification levels are used to determine access to certain data and information within the internal data portal, as well as the level of protection certain digital assets receive from the Corporate Information Security Office. So, to solve this issue, the Data Governance Working Committee compared each of the existing sets of definitions and did an industry scan. Also, even looking at other orders of governance definitions, as well as even ISO's definitions, which led us to develop our own Frankenstein version of definitions based off of the ISO levels. We essentially took all of the parts we liked from all of the examples you just saw, and in the new definitions, provided examples of who would have access and the kinds of information and data that would typically fall under each level. The reason we chose to do so is in addition to being recommended by ISO, city staff were already used to these levels and they're more easily understood by the public. Moving on to the risks, city staff raised concerns that the existing descriptions were vague, making it difficult to classify data and information. This is mitigated in this option by updating the descriptions to be more meaningful, including the aforementioned examples and a classification guideline. Another concern is that these classification levels might make it difficult to work with the GOA and GOC and other organizations that have adopted their classification levels. This was addressed by mapping the classification levels of this option to the classification levels of the GOA and the GOC. In terms of impact, there isn't actually that much, as we didn't really change the core sentiment of each information security classification level. We simply standardized them and made the descriptions better for each of them so they're more useful when it actually comes to doing the classification. So the Corporate Information Security Office will update its definition in its Digital Asset Management Standard, and the IDP team will update their definitions in the IDP itself and the intake process they use for it. And any future policy tools that may require the use of information security classifications will refer back to the Digital Asset Management Standard to ensure alignment. In terms of broader awareness, the following areas will also use the updated definitions. The CAP office, as they sometimes refer to these classifications when doing consultations. The data analytics teams, they refer to them in their Elevating Data Literacy course. And of course, both corporate records and information management and data governance and management teams are creating training regarding data and information stewardship, which will cite them as well. So in summary, we were able to solve this issue relatively quickly and painlessly, despite the fact that information security classifications touch many different parts of the city, and there's many different elements of delegated authority as to who owns what. But it didn't really matter because we were all collaborating. And what happened next is even better. In 2023, the city auditor took a look at the Corporate Information Security Office's policies and practices. Long story short, the auditor found a significant issue. CISO protects data based on its information security classification, with those that are more restricted receiving more controls and protection. However, the audit found that the vast majority of the city's data had not been classified as per information security classifications. Therefore, the auditor recommended that the city classify all of its data according to information security classifications so that it can properly protect it. City administration responded saying it would update the classification levels, which had already been done. How fortuitous, like the timing was perfect, and classify all of the city's data, committing to do the latter by the end of 2024. Switching gears, let's talk about the City of Edmonton's classification and retention schedule, which OCC, or Information Management, uses to help determine how long the city should keep its information. This is a gross oversimplification of what it does, but essentially the classification and retention schedule groups common types of information together so that the city knows how long it needs to keep its information. It's also worth noting that the schedule is comprehensive. And here's a simplified example of how OCC, or Information Management, uses a big bucket methodology to create the record series. On this slide, we have some information at the city. The classification and retention schedule classifies all the information by function and record series. Personal licenses, staff parking and tracking, and cemetery applications, ledgers, and permits are all examples of different record series. Using the record series, Information Management broadly assigns the retention series based on the record series that the information is classified as. So, for example, we know that we have to keep all the information classified as staff parking for 2 years. The city uses this method because it would take an extreme amount of time and effort to assign a retention schedule to each piece of information individually, which gave us an idea. The city addresses the issue of having too many pieces of information to assign retention periods individually by using a big bucket methodology, which allows the city to apply retention schedules broadly, resulting in a happy city clerk. Maybe the city can do the same for our issue of too much data, using the classification and retention schedule with information security classifications mapped to the record series to apply information security classifications broadly, resulting in a happy chief information officer. So by the way, these pictures, the one at the top, that's Aileen Giesbrick, who is our city clerk and the branch manager of the branch that houses information management. And below you have Daryl Croft, who is our chief information officer and the branch manager of OCT, which is essentially the IT branch. And I just want to comment, this really shows how, us as data management, we're looking into information security classifications, but look how much this touches both information management and IT. Like our 3 areas really are truly so interrelated. So, in fact, corporate records was already thinking about adding information security classifications to each record series, and there were actually 10 record series that had already had information security classifications mapped to them, but it was only for restricted ones, which left us the task of mapping the rest. First, we had the Open Data Working Group do the initial mapping. Note that it is the body that determines if data can be added to the Open Data Portal or not, as well as what information security classification data receives when being added to the internal data portal. Then we had the DGWC review the initial mapping, stressing that all the business area representatives confirmed the mapping with their areas. And finally, we had one final validation, getting the business areas themselves to validate the default classifications. These branches were mapped to each record series by its subject matter expert by the Data Governance Working Committee, again, getting the business representatives to validate the mapping. At this point, you may be wondering how one or two branches could validate when some record series have information that spans the entire corporation. The key here is that we wanted the subject matter experts of the information that the record series represents to do the validating. And we think this real life example demonstrates this point. As you can see, Kate mentions that external relations spans all of the departments. We reply that although this is true, we're just looking for the branch or branches that would be the subject matter experts so that they can validate the assigned information security classification, which made sense to Kate. You may have noticed that we keep saying default information security classification. That is because it is the default. When the SMEs initially did the mapping, they considered the most sensitive information within the record series, assigning the most restrictive classification. Therefore, there could be some information within that record series that could be classified as a less restrictive information security classification. For example, let's take a look at the record fire service permits and inspections record series. Most of the information is actually only confidential, but corporate access and privacy and legal services informed us that the blueprints are always restricted, so the whole record series is classified as restricted. However, if a business area uses, manipulates, or shares any data, they can take a look at it themselves to see if it should have a less restrictive information security classification than the default one assigned to the record series. And how do they do that? We developed a guideline to help business areas classify their data, which has all the tools and information businesses need to classify their own data. In summary, in much the same way that applying retention schedules to each piece of information is laborious and time-intensive, applying information security classifications to all the city's data would have been a monumental task. So we're using the classification and retention schedule with the information security classification levels mapped to the record series to broadly assign information security classifications to all the city's data. So, for example, we know that anything falling under staff parking and tracking record series has the default information security classification of internal. So to conclude, the thesis of this presentation is, and I'm going to read off the slide to you for the first time because I feel it's so important, collaboration is everything. There is no way we would have met that deadline if we hadn't already had that integrated governance structure. Plus, I'm not even sure if we would have come up with the idea if we hadn't been working so closely with information management, not to mention to get the blessing to use their schedule. Truly, I'm not even joking when I've learned so much about even information management, which has helped me in data management, just from collaborating with them. And even this slide, it was kind of funny. Earlier, if you remember the point where I was talking about the life cycle principle in the administrative policy, where we said, from the start, which is planning, I used to have from start, which begins at planning, to destruction. But you'll note that I put disposition now because I understand, destruction is not the final outcome. It could also be archival, for example, but I'm preaching to the choir. But the point I'm making is I've learned so much from them, and that's truly helped me in my work. I also talked about collaborating. I talked a lot about collaborating with information management, but you also need to include other areas. IT is huge, and having them being the third leg of the tripod, that's actually what the sponsors refer to themselves as, has made life easier too. But it doesn't just stop there. You need to include the business areas themselves, as this will lead to better outcomes and higher adoption rates of policies as you roll them out. And you know what? It's gonna feel like it slows you down. So that administrative policy I showed you, the one that's on edmonton.ca, that kind of took me a year from start to finish. So, Gina and I, we wrote it, and then of course we went through revisions and all that stuff with the Data Governance Working Committee, and then finally we took it to the Data Governance Steering Committee, and they endorsed it. They can't approve it because policies that affect the entire corporation, the way our corporate policy framework works is that's the city manager has to sign off on it. But before we could go to the city manager, we did a huge road show. We went to the, leadership team meetings of all the departments and all that kind of stuff. And it took a full year. So I remember telling my mom, the day it was approved by the city manager, I was like, yeah. And she made the comment, weren't you working on that a year ago? And I was like, yeah, well, it took a year to do. But I truly think that if we didn't already have that integrated structure, though, it would have taken even longer. I feel like because more people would have been seeing it for the first time, would have been like, what? Or, they wouldn't have had the confidence that all these other areas had seen it. So I think the more you engage, it does take more time, but I think that just saves you more time down the road. A stitch in time saves nine. So to wrap up, we started off kind of looking to draw the lines and establish our own kingdom for data management, but we ended up creating an empire with information management and IT. Our branch managers agreed to consult with each other for everything, and it really has been working. It also may be relevant to note that all of them were relatively new when we started down this path, so that might have made things easier as they were all kind of starting with from scratch with each other. And where our work overlaps, it's not a question of who's doing it and who has the final say. Rather, it's about who will lead it as we collaborate on everything now. And even then, it's usually easy as we just decided that OCC, particularly information management, they've been around longer and they're more established. So we're happy to have them lead retention and disposition and all of the other things that traditional information management cares about. And we'll just try to fill in the gaps of the work that they don't already focus on due to resource constraints and whatnot. Of course, we'll also take care of the more data-centric things, but that's really kind of how we're working together, and it really has been working out. So to wrap up, to end this presentation, I'll put a quote from Helen Keller on the board because I truly believe in it. And I'd like to thank you all for your attention and open up the floor to any questions if anybody has any. Thank you.
Well, that was quite a presentation, Sean. That was amazing, actually. Very, very good presentation. I have to go back and I'll have to go back and watch it again, and maybe a couple of times just to see all the stuff that you've done. So I guess it's like slow motion a bit, from the start, kind of gets started and moves forward. Um, Many places in Canada right now, my experience anyway, is that many places in Canada aren't together with information management and data. Like you're kind of unique in that way. You get along. People are starting to put things into the chat now to ask about things. Um, I have my question to you is based on the fact that you have a large infrastructure for what I would call structured information in the city of Edmonton. Is there a way, have you decided yet, or have you developed a way yet to do disposition of the data in those structured solutions like SAP? I mean, SAP doesn't really have a retention and disposition capability for the data in their structured information.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And I want to caution that I am not information management. So take what I say with a word of advice or a grain of salt. I'm still careful not to step on their toes, but what I can tell you is that you're right. And that was another opportunity that came up is that while we're doing the Enterprise Commons project is kind of it's been going on 5 years now. I don't think it surprises anybody in the room. I know that the province theirs was several years over schedule, and it's a lot of work and it's hard. So I don't think they are doing specifically with retention and disposition for their data migration. However, remember how I told you originally the Data Governance Steering Committee was formed because Some people needed to make high level decisions. Well, one of the issues that the Enterprise Commons project, the ERP upgrade, the data migration they ran into is that they didn't consider the historical data in the legacy applications. So this was their first big kind of issue. Basically, they were like, yeah, the project plan is we'll have all these harvestable savings, we'll turn off all those applications and we'll move on with our life. However, some of the businesses, as they came to understand this more, they were like, wait a minute, we still need some of the information that is in the legacy applications that's not going to the new S4 HANA SAP platform. They need it for, there's legal reasons. I'm sure HR, if there's disputes, unions, that kind of stuff. There's operational reasons they still needed it. And even for analytics, they wanted to do, trends over time. So there ended up being quite a bit of data that was being left behind and didn't have a home. So that kind of birthed this new project that my team was put in charge of called the Corporate Integrated Data Solution. Essentially, we were just taking all the historical data and putting it into a warehouse so that the business areas can use it. Now, we took that as an opportunity to kind of build a new central warehouse. And you heard me reference the internal data portal. Well, this project will take that over and it'll become even more comprehensive. And phase two will involve integrations with Enterprise Commons. Now, you're like, answer my question already. But the point is because we were leading that project and because we're so plugged in with the information management, when we brought them on board at the start, when we were mapping it out and what we wanted to do, they were like, hey, let's use this opportunity to apply retention schedules to all of the data you're taking from the legacy applications to the new warehouse. And we've been doing just that. So,
Mhm.
so that's another example of how it was kind of good. It was good for both of us. It was better for us because we learned, okay, if some of that stuff's just being destroyed, we don't need to bother taking it over. And it was good for them because they finally, they finally got to be able to apply retention on a broader scale
Mhm.
greater than they had at any opportunity before.
Mhm. Shameless plug for next month's presentation. Jen Peters is going to be doing a presentation, which you might want to be on for, Sean. Jen Peters is doing a presentation on right to be forgotten, which has always been a kind of a bugbear with me because our privacy legislation in Canada doesn't have that yet. But I'm going to just as a guess, educated guess, I'm going to guess that we're going to be like GDPR and some of the other privacy regimes around the world that have right to be forgotten in them. And I don't think that a lot of our clients across Canada are even going to be able to think about right to be forgotten with all the data that's everywhere in all those structured systems. It's going to be like a nightmare. Anyway, enough of that. Lots of questions in the, or
Yeah,
lots,
I can
lots
go
of
through some of the
comments.
questions here if you like. Just a quick note that the presentation we usually post the presentation if that's all right with you, Sean, afterwards.
Yeah,
We'll
it's
put up,
fine
yeah, we'll put up recording and slides if you want to make those available as well.
for
So,
sure.
questions here, just a combination here from Alicia and Lewis, but obviously, getting the support from top down and all that was great, but how do you get different areas, you get that typical, why are we trying to interfere with my work kind of attitude when trying to implement this? Like I was thinking back to your diagram, when you turn one of those, red to blue, you're interfering with the operations of somebody's day-to-day work. How do you kind of deal with those kind of people problems with this kind of change?
So that's a great question. And anybody who's ever done any change management knows that that's the heart of it, right? And it doesn't matter what you're doing. So, of course, we have run into some of that, but not as much as you think because we're taking a two-prong approach. So, I'll talk about the leadership side first. The first one is by getting that policy, the data and information administrative policy in place and the city manager signing off saying this is important, that kind of gives us the teeth, so to speak, or, we're doing this to improve. I guess there's three things I'll say, but we're doing this to improve the city. So that's the third one. You got to show them what's in it for them, right? So we have that policy. But the second one is when you're doing the change. So we have the top down approach, but we also have the bottom up approach. Whereas if you remember looking at that data governance working committee, there is usually between 20 to 30 people on the call. and it's held every 2 weeks. And a lot of them, and it's not mandatory, but a lot of them just show up, and it's growing more and more all the time. So hopefully, as we develop those policies, as we go to take it from red to blue, we've already included them in it. And remember, that committee had so at the City of Edmonton, like data management, information management, we refer to ourselves as enabling services. And then everybody else, like, the people that run the rec center or that pave the roads, those are the business areas, right? So we have representation from all the business areas there. So hopefully that as we're developing it and it's going through the paces at the data governance working committee level, the people who it affects, it sees them. So it's not a surprise and they can see themselves in the change and they can truly make it work. So the third thing I'll tie to is you always got to tie good change management is what's in it for them or what's in it for me. So we always try to lead with that in our communications. Like the reason this standard, if we're doing a metadata standard is, well, this will decrease the amount of time you spend searching for data, or it'll let you understand the data better so that you don't have to spend so much time looking for those answers and that kind of stuff. So I guess the three things: get the leadership approach, which gives you the teeth. You get the bottom up approach by including everybody in the process, and you really always focus on the benefits for people. So sure, I can put out a metadata standard because I want to and I'm in data management, but it has to be for the business areas and they have to see the value they're getting out of it and why they should bother doing it.
Yeah, sounds good. So Donna here is saying the new provincial legislation for privacy calls for having data classifications. So the city looks like you're well positioned to meet the requirements that are coming. But then she also adds here that did the privacy folks get involved with the data security classification?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So you heard me refer to OCC, and I'll just go back, which is the Office of the City Clerk, and they're wait, am I still presenting?
Yep. We see the thank you questions screen.
Okay. Oh, there we go. Perfect. I'll just go back quickly here. So when I talk about information management, the corporate access and privacy office, it's a different section, but it's also in the office of the city clerk. And I just think of them the same in my mind. Like we're very lock and step with them. So not only are they on the data governance working committee, but I meet with their director they just combined them actually. So there's now one director for both CRIM, corporate records and information management, and corporate access and privacy. So I have a weekly touch point with their director. So like, yeah, that's very much considered. And Aileen, who I told you is it's funny because Aileen is the city clerk and she's the branch manager of information management and all that stuff. She's one of data management's program sponsors, along with my own branch manager and IT branch manager. So privacy is always front and centered, and they're involved in everything. And even when I write stuff, they're usually the first that we get to review. Even before we take it to the Data Governance Working Committee, often we'll just run it quickly by information management and corporate access and privacy just to speed things up. So yeah, very much with them.
Okay, John's asking here the reference to the governance steering committee, the terms and references. Do you have that available? Is that some kind of I know you're talking about the policy document was available but the terms and references for
Yes, I do have it. However, I'll want to ask them before I share it with you, but I can make a note to share the terms of reference. I can just quickly give you guys a gander. Uh,
and that's something, if you are, we can also post it with the material if that's something we can make available.
Did that show up on my screen?
Yep.
Or is it still the presentation?
Group name. Yeah, we see group name there.
So you can see this is our term. We got our mandate, we've got our membership, the responsibilities, that kind of stuff, kind of the governance approach. So it's actually under review right now. But I will make a note of that and I will ask them if it's okay to share that.
Okay. Another question here. Ken saying, I appreciate your effort to connect security classification. I've tried to do this a number of times over the decades, and while direct connection can be made for some functional record series, it gives the example of HR, restricted, etc. There are some series that have at least 3 or 4 security levels. For example, committees and contracts can be public to restricted. Is the intent that the restricted level is applied with staff downgrading the security level on those cases? In a
Yeah,
case,
you're
yeah,
100%. So you're right. It's never going to be a perfect bucket or a one-to-one relationship. And if you remember the example I gave for fire, I think it was, no, wait, this one. I think I gave the example about fire services record series or
drawings.
something along that line. Here it is.
Yep.
This one, um, we classified it as restricted, but we knew that there'd be some confidential stuff in there. So yeah, the intent is that this is the default. We just have that. But if business areas find stuff within it, they can that they think should be less restrictive, they are more than welcome and encouraged to get it that specific stuff within the record series classified to a less restrictive classification. That process will also be done with CISO, the Corporate Information Security Office, as they now go to protect everything according to its classification. If there's some record series that they know there's a bunch of other ones, they'll be doing a little bit more due diligence and work to ensure that we're not protecting all of it at the highest level, because there is a cost in both time and money and resources for that as well.
Yeah, the example I was doing a project recently. We're dealing with a department, say, since you're on the HR here, the HR had the HR classifications for their documents, but within their record series, they identified a record type that then they had a security classification to a record type within the record series. So they were a little bit more granular for
Oh,
that specific department to be able to identify, just like you had here, that the drawings went, more restricted.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that might be something maybe in the future we can get more granular with kind of this stuff up here.
Yeah, you would
Um,
hate for an end user to have to deal with every record series and every record type within that record series and then having that huge cross mapping. But within one department, it was kind of easy because they were dealing with a subset of record series that their record types were easy for them to identify within what they were dealing with. Yeah.
For sure. And you'll
Yep.
remember that all of these default classifications were signed off by the business areas themselves too.
Right. Yeah. Uh, Lewis here says, very impressed on how you're moving the bar forward. If you could do it over, is there anything you would do differently?
Oh, wow. Um, I guess just more collaboration earlier. I mean, I kind of made it sound like I told this story that it was just this, and this, and obviously it wasn't quite that bumpy. And at the start, it really was like, well, we need to figure out what we're doing. We had more of an us versus them instead of a one city approach. So I think if we'd come to that even earlier, it probably would have made things easier. Um, yeah, I think that would be the big one if I could go back and do it again. And just yeah, really involving everyone. So at various steps of the way, now we're really, really good, but throughout this process, there were some points where, why wasn't this person consulted? So maybe just consulting everybody and their dog from the get-go would have made life easier as well.
Right. Just to go back to the idea of security classification data. In BC, Ken saying here they have a routine release as a way to identify published or public available record series or types. So there's a routine release kind of procedure or some kind of workflow that would go through, as I'm guessing, Ken, that identifies things that would then get published for publicly available material. What method did you use for consultation with business users?
So I guess there's two main methods. The first one, and obvious one, is the Data Governance Working Committee, because we have such great membership there and a lot of people coming. And we've also stressed at the working committee several times, and it's in our terms of reference, that if you sit on the committee, you are expected to take things back to your own areas and disseminate the information and elevate things as needed as you think required in your area. So that's been a great channel. But anything we're working on and we know a specific area, or we even think a specific area needs to be involved, we'll reach out to them beforehand and just set up meetings. So a lot of my work is doing presentations like this, but meeting with people, telling them what we're trying to do, and then figuring out, okay, what do you need from this? What are you worried about? And just really trying to gather all the perspectives. So yeah, through the existing governing structure, the working committee, but then as well as a lot of just one-on-one, or I might meet with a team, I might meet with a director, that kind of stuff. It's really doing your due diligence, and before anything we undertake, we try to do a stakeholder analysis, and understand who's all affected and why, and then reach out to them even before going to the working committee, so that when we go there, because it just saves time, right? So yeah, a lot of meets and greets.
Ashley's got another question here. I found that often different definitions for the same word between data and information staff, for instance, the definition of archives. Is there something you found, and how did you develop shared definitions for common terms?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you actually go to our, one of the first things we did, and I should have it bookmarked here. Here we go. If you go to our policy, we actually have definitions for data and information here. So again, we came up with these through that same collaborative process. And then if you remember from my deck, I remember how I talked about how there were three different definitions for the security classifications.
Mhm.
I don't know what slide it's buried on, but there was the information management glossary of terms. So you'll remember that was one of the different ones. I think I can find that up here. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We decided that, okay, we need to have common definitions across the corporation. So we're moving to, well, there's two things we're doing. The information glossary of terms, which was kind of before was isolated, and it's what information management came up with. We're kind of expanding that now for all things data. So they've been updating terms that they have in there, and we've been using some of theirs. But second is we're also now in the process of doing an RFP for a data management tool. It's specifically, we're looking at Informatica, and then we want to come up with a business glossary. So we'll have data dictionaries, but we want to come up with an official business glossary for the entire corporation that everyone can put in there. So, and what's really cool about it is you can have kind of say your corporate definition, but you can even link to maybe a different area has a specific one, more specific. So you'll be able to kind of see, okay, it means this to HR, it means to that. But ultimately, we want to get a standardized version, and that'll be housed in Informatica. But for right now, it's information management's glossary of terms, which we have taken some work to update and standardize all the terms.
Yeah, and the other thing I've noticed too is that often in the standards and procedures, you give those terms contextual,
Yeah.
more contextual information around them to help the definition be more defined for those areas. Yeah.
So
Just
I
just
have my generative AI standard up here. It was just something else I'm working on. We just did a review, but we start off with definitions here, right? So we talk about that. So yeah, in all the policy tools, we do have that too.
Just as a point of interest, ARM International is just releasing they've done extensive changes to the glossary, the ARM glossary of terms. So there'll be a new glossary available very quickly with ARM International as well. A lot of time spent on looking at everybody's terminology around the world and making sure that the new ARMA glossary is with it in terms of the times. So that'll be good. The other thing that's coming up that'll be interesting, I think, for everybody in the data side too, is that we are going to be the working group for the new information governance, ARM and information governance uh, terminologies and highlights. We're working on a model right now, an implementation model 2.1, and we'll be working soon on the 3.0 model for information governance implementation model, which I hope will have in the end, Sean, data as a separate spoke toward the hub as well. So it will be part of the whole.
Love it.
We're getting close to the end here, but maybe we'll just do one more. I think this one's kind of a good something you should talk to. You mentioned working with the other organizations for shared information on data governance. Can you speak about the networking with others and how you did there? I know you referenced like York and some ISO things and stuff like that. How did that play into everything?
Yeah, so we actually I sit on this monthly call, and I think it was the city of Ottawa initiated it. But essentially, what they did is they just tried to get people who are doing data governance from across the country to kind of have a maybe very similar to this. Well, little less formal than this. We just have topics every month. So one top like last month it was data quality, and then before that it was metadata, and then we had a month where we talked about information security classifications. And each city just kind of presents on where it is and where it's at. So through that process, there's been a lot of collaboration. But even before that, I don't know, just every once in a while there'd be random people just reaching out from, say, York. So York region in Ontario reached out and was like, "Hey, we want to like we heard about this," or maybe they saw me speak at the Municipal Information Systems Association or something, and we would collaborate and share stuff there. And actually, one of my favorite stories I like to share about is if you see here, this picture, this is actually a picture of York's, and you can see how it's the white or whatever. But in the end, we actually we kind of took what they did and made it even more comprehensive. So it was kind of funny. So like a year before York shared that with us, then we kind of took it, made it our own, and then presented it back to them over a year later. And they're like, "Oh, can we have that one?" So now I think like they updated theirs based off the work we did, but we stood on their shoulders to get there in the first place. So it's really kind of a cool, network that we basically just steal
Great.
each other's work.
Great. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
for
I
sure.
Uh,
did I did also ask about if information management like the Western IM could be part of it, but the group said they wanted to keep it closed just for data management. So
yeah.
I did look into that.
No, good. I think we're getting close to the end here. Rick, maybe you want to wrap it up?
Yeah, no, thanks. Sean, that was a marvelous presentation. Thank you so much for doing that for us. It's a very timely topic for all of us because a lot of people have data people now that weren't there a few years ago. Like they
Yeah.
just started appearing in many of the organizations. A lot of times too, unfortunately, the data people appear and they're just out doing their own thing and they don't get together with records and information management at all. You've kind of done it all the right way. So I gotta, kudos to Sean for doing all this the way I think it should be done. And thank you all for joining the presentation today. It's great to support the IMCC, the IM Canada Connect sessions. It's about all of us here getting Canadian content for all of us in Canada. And the next one you'll be getting information on the next one soon for, as I said, the right to be forgotten presentation that Jen's going to do for November. So really great. And of course, stay tuned for Troy will be doing the Christmas session again in December. So it's always interesting to have Troy do the Christmas session, just so we can all get together and chat amongst ourselves and whine about records, Ken. That would be the thing to do. Anyway,
Well, thank
uh,
you again. And thank you everybody for your comments. I really appreciate it. But I do want to really stress that, like, sure, maybe I've done some great work, but it wasn't just me. And even this, if I'm showing you our policy framework, this was mostly the brainchild of Gina Smith. If any of you know she's acting director of corporate records and information management. Sure, I helped a little bit about it, but I got to give credit to our information management folks too. They kind of spearheaded this with us, and we're every step of the day together, every step of the way. So I want to give them the acknowledgement that they deserve as well.
thanks, Sean. You're a good guy. We appreciate that very much as a records and information management group.
Yep.
Thanks again, everybody, for being on the session. Troy, thank you for kind of stick handling this for us as always, and look forward to seeing everybody on next month's session.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.